Today I have Stephen Pell here from Pell Artists. Hey Stephen, thanks for coming down.
It's great to be here.
So Stephen, I know a little bit about Pell Artists and what you do, but if you could first, just to kind of give context to the conversation, if you could tell me what your job role is, who you are and what you do.
Okay, so by way of background, I'm a chartered accountant and chartered tax advisor. So I have specialisms in those fields.
Right.
And I've worked within the music industry in those capacities for the past 10 years or so. I started off in a sort of a well-known West End entertainment practice.
Right.
And 2 years ago, I founded Pell Artists, which is really sort of a way for me to scratch that entrepreneurial itch in one way.
Right.
And to serve artists that I felt were being underserved in the industry, in particular sort of the emerging artists. I felt that those artists were the ones that actually needed the help and found it most valuable, and actually showed more of an interest, which made working with them much more interesting and a pleasure to do. So I founded Pell Artists in July 2015, I think it was.
Okay.
And since then we've just flown, really.
And what exactly is it that you would do with artists? So I know you want to help independent musicians and kind of give them, the right footing to grow and to develop and get better at what they're doing, the right support. So what exactly would that involve? What kind of services do you offer?
Well, I started the business on three kind of core principles, really.
Right.
The first one being that I wanted to educate and inspire artists in the first instance, because I felt that there wasn't really enough of that, particularly in the business world, business sphere for artists. The second thing that I wanted to do with artists that I work with was to make the world a better place for them, because the music industry is notoriously full of sharks. It's very difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
And ultimately solve the biggest challenge for artists, particularly those emerging artists, which is to solve financial freedom for them. And the way to do that is by getting a grip on the numbers, and the business strategy, and protecting yourself in that kind of way. Now, the kind of services that I provide have been built around that. So I come from a traditional accounting background and tax background. But I found that just doesn't work in the music industry. I've had to build something a lot more niche, and I only work within music, so I only work with artists and the supporting companies, so managers, record labels, publishers. But there are a lot of similar trends and knowledge transfer between that, and the kind of services that they need are sort of more geared towards business management, so taking care of all the sort of the detail, looking after the day-to-day transactions for them, invoicing, credit control, reconciling, filing tax returns, all of that kind of taking the sort of the pain away side of things. Right. But also where I kind of added more value and felt that there was a bigger need was in providing what I kind of like to call a sort of a CFO-style service for artists, where it's a lot more to do with the strategy behind what they're doing, helping them with the business plans, helping them to identify the markets, helping them to quantify that, helping them when it comes to negotiating deals, which is a big thing, particularly for independent artists who might have a lawyer and a manager, but when it comes to the numbers, you really need someone with expertise in the numbers side to go through these kind of things. And contracts are very complex these days. Whether that's if you sign a record deal, or which I see quite a lot of these days, is artists receiving outside investment or outside funding. Either way, there's complexities to that, and there's reporting requirements that are quite complex. So really, my job is to take away a lot of the heat from the artists, allow them to focus on their art and creating, and to provide that security.
And do you find that is something that is often maybe not thought about as much with creative individuals, that they don't think about, okay, cool, I have this money, but how am I going to manage it? What am I going to look at? How am I going to take care of it? Or is it a case that a lot of them are really quite switched on to all of that kind of stuff?
from my experience,
Yeah.
you get every
Right.
type of personality that comes into the music business. What I am really, really interested in, who I like working with, are entrepreneurially minded artists. Those guys are the ones that really want it and will. They find ways to become successful.
Right.
But sort of going back a peg, it is down to mindset.
Yeah.
But a mindset can be taught.
Right.
So,
and is that something that you're
and that's something that I'm
Right.
very with sort of my philosophies and values. I'm very keen on helping to educate and inspire.
Yeah.
And I say, look, this is what the most successful artists I have done, or I have worked with, have done. This is how they think. This is how they look after their money. This is what they do. You can do that too. If you're not doing it already, let's work out how we can get into that place.
Yeah.
And it can be really simple things.
And generally speaking, do you work with artists who, because, let's not beat around the bush, money is a really sensitive thing for a lot of creatives, musicians, or even, designers. So the clients that you work with, are they artists who are steady with their income and have that there? Or are they more people who are thinking, okay, cool, how am I going to push to get a good representation for my work, for my music, for my effort?
Yeah, so when an artist usually comes to me, it's at the point where there is money.
Right.
And they need to understand how to manage that.
Right.
Typically, it would be when they sign a record deal, because you typically get fairly decent advance. It might be when you get investment or outside investment, or it might be that you sign with a booking agent and you're about to do a load of gigs, or you're about to go and tour, or you have an international tax issue. So it's at the point where there's money is a problem or an issue, or there's a problem to be solved. That's usually the point when they come to me. But what I do like to do is I like to be vocal and speaking with artists up to that point, so that they can manage what they do to get to that point.
Right. And you were talking that you work with artists who've just signed a label. Have you found, because I know in the past maybe 5-6 years, the way that the labels hand the work, the way that labels hand what they do with artists and signing them for not necessarily to release a major project or dropping them, and it seems really, really fickle. And a lot of the guys that we work with will get signed, and they will think that's the be-all and end-all. And it's, fantastic to see good things happen. But a lot of the time, a release doesn't materialize. So are there any trends that you've kind of noticed in this period of how record labels are changing their approach with artists, or the amounts of money that they're paying out? Is there anything, kind of any insights you could give us?
Yeah, very interesting topic, actually. Say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, record labels were spending stupid amounts of money on advances to artists, and even unsigned artists coming to them that were really unknown. They were getting massive 6-figure easy advances.
Wow.
What tended to happen when the streaming side of things started kicking in, and the revenue model was working itself out, labels started to get a little bit scared and push back, and weren't offering as much. So and then sort of people started, then the competitors came into the market. They were offering different types of deals, licensing deals as opposed to assigning your rights type of deals, which artists love. Better reporting, better cash flow, all of these things made other models more viable, and particularly for independent artists who wanted to retain ownership of their rights. But sort of taking that even further, that opened up a whole new field of funding for artists. Because these are sort of smaller, short-term licensing deals, the labels or the sort of distributors weren't offering advances per se, or they were offering smaller advances. So there was a funding gap, and that funding gap needed to be plugged. But what I have found, particularly over the last 2.5-3 years, is that there seems to be an appetite for people to want to invest in music, and particularly in artists, which is, I've been involved in the UMA Music Fund, which is a mechanism for capturing investors and allocating funds for investing in artists. But also, I've worked with independent investors that really like a band, that want to be involved in the project, and that would offer what would traditionally be the record label advance to be part of that project and to share in the revenue streams going forward.
Right.
And my role in that is, there's a lot of advice to go around that. There's a lot of, you have to set up the right companies.
Sure.
There's special tax incentives that the investors get for doing so. And it can be quite complex. But, talking about trends, that is something that's certainly on the up, because
so
artists...
it's quite a new territory for...
Yeah, artists have the resources now to do this independently.
Right.
There's an easy access to market, cost-effective access to market. There's distribution platforms like Cobalt, for example, who have the network and the reach of the major labels. And they don't take your rights. There's it's a sort of a licensing mechanism around it rather than the traditional record deal.
Right.
So it's interesting. Yeah, there's certainly a trend towards independent artists being able to do this, and obviously with YouTube and with Spotify, revenue. There's other revenue streams coming through to the artists that make having an independent career a lot more sustainable.
Yeah.
Again, that needs managing. You need to be able to cash flow and budget, and have a way of working out how much. It can be difficult. How much money is going to be coming in, after a certain amount of plays or whatever.
I wanted to ask: are you, obviously from what you're telling us, it sounds like you do a tremendous amount with new musicians, whether they're independent or they've just recently come into money or stuff's going really well with them. Are you tied in with any labels or any organisations who, as soon as they have someone like this, they go, cool, Pell Artists, we're going to send them there to kind of get that strategy, to get that business? Or is it that the artists will receive a payment, or they will have money to their name and they will kind of research and find you guys?
When it comes to, I guess, first of all, I'd say I'm completely independent, so I don't have any ties with anyone at all. There's no businesses. And that's probably one of the key values that I have, is that not every deal is the same. Not everyone is the same. You can't just push people into a box.
Cool.
You need to be able to, in this industry, because the things are changing so quickly, the different revenue models, different rights structures. You need to be able to adapt very quickly to those.
Yeah.
And you can't have something that you have to unpick or wait 10 years, because that will just ruin your career.
Sure.
So I'm really anti that, and I'm actually very pro the independent model, the independent route. I think labels do have a purpose, but more as sort of a marketing machine. I think these days, particularly management, are becoming much more sophisticated, and they can do a lot of the roles that the label does. They do have a place, record labels, but perhaps not in the same way that they traditionally did. Just as an example, the sort of the YouTube network or the sort of the social media reach that artists have these days. Really, that's what record labels are trying to tap into. Yeah. That's what they want. Yeah. Because then they can cross sell. So that's what artists have got to protect, and they have a lot of power with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sort of putting investors in touch, is that what you're sort of saying around into sort of the artists?
I was wondering whether, you said you're not affiliated with anybody. I was just wondering whether it's something that artists, you're the go-to guy for this, or whether they find you organically online through research or word of mouth or something.
Yeah, funnily enough, everything's been word of mouth, really.
Cool.
And I can't. Funny enough, you say about the sort of the independent investment model, because that has been one of the things which I have been fairly well known for.
Right.
I think that I have I've done a fair few of the sort of the structures now, and negotiations with HMRC and getting the tax incentives and advising on this. And as soon as one person does it, an investor finds one band, and then they want to invest in another band, and then they want to invest in another band.
And so with these investors, I didn't really quite understand that until you just told me now. Is that something that investors will come to you, or you will go to investors? How does that, or like in what order is that set up? That you have an artist, you go to an investor, or an investor comes to you, you find an artist? Yeah,
usually what happens is that the artist will have someone that wants to invest in them.
Right.
It could be a family member. It could be someone completely that's been to a gig and that's seen you and wants to put some money into the band.
And usually, how, if you don't mind me asking, how big are those investments?
Anywhere from what have I done lately? 20,000 to 50,000 a time, something like that.
Yeah. I think stuff like that is really. I think it's really important to ask, because a lot of podcasts or a lot of interviews, stuff like that, there's really good conversations going on, And I know that some of the people watching them just want the hard kind of statistics, whether it's £100 or it's £1,000,000. I think a lot of people, it's really helpful for them to know, okay, cool, so an investor gave 10,000, an investor gave 20, 50,000. So that's why I asked that. Really.
Yeah, I think when it comes to investing in the important point to make here is that every situation is different.
Sure.
And my role within that is to build the financial model for the artist. And the investors rely on me with the expertise within the industry to understand the revenue streams, to understand the model.
Yeah.
Because I work with a lot of artists, I see the trends. I see how they earn their money. I see where the revenue will come from. I know what the costs are. I know what the overheads are. And having that is vital.
Yeah.
And even if you don't get investment at that point, it's quite a good practice to go through to see what your business model is.
Right.
For artists to really understand where they're making their money, how they're going to make their money, and what they need to focus on to grow their business. Because at the end of the day, if you're making money, you're in business, and you're an entrepreneur, and you have to, if you want to be successful, you have to think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean that's a really, really valid point. So, somebody starting out you're saying now that it's a good idea for them to sit down, and they may not necessarily have the money at the moment, but to think, where is this money going to come from?
Yeah.
Where is it? And is that when you work with people, when they come to you, do you kind of say, all right, cool, this is, I've seen in the past that so-and-so made money by doing X, Y, Z, maybe you should consider this? Or so is that part of the strategy?
Absolutely.
Helping them understand where they're making their money?
Yeah, I mean, that is. I mean, I love the early meetings when I meet with artists. They're among the most exciting for me because there's so much excitement. There's so much, because they are like entrepreneurs. You're trying to catch their ideas.
Sure.
You're trying to say, well, perhaps don't do this before you do this. And there's always a conversation, and there's normally a period of time where I work with an artist, but they wouldn't be a client yet. Right. But I would be giving them some advice and tips on how to get into that mindset, how to get themselves ready before they do sign a deal, how to get themselves into the place where they need to be financially. And it really is a mindset thing. It can be as simple as not spending more than you earn, which to some people is not that straightforward.
Sure.
It can be making sure that you have a separate bank account set up, that's aside from your personal spending.
Yeah.
Making sure that you have an accounting system, a cloud accounting system. Really cost-effective things to use these days.
Yeah.
Really easy to use, so that it tracks your transactions.
Do you have any preferred cloud accounting systems?
Everyone should get Xero.
Yeah.
It works perfectly for artists, and it's really easy to use.
That's XERO, right?
Yes.
Yeah. .com.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I also recommend getting something called Receipt Bank as well for your receipts.
Cool.
That can link in with your cloud accounting software, or so you can go around snapping pictures of your receipts on the go. You can it sort of reads the receipts and does all the bookkeeping for you.
Amazing.
So all of that stuff that you hate doing, this is all automated now.
I think there's a lot of people who accounts, finance, all of that kind of stuff as an entrepreneur, it really has a bad rep. It's scary. It's the unknown. It's something that a lot of people really shy away from and kind of leave it till the end of the tax year to deal it and blah, blah, blah. But we've found over the years, and speaking to people like yourself, that there's some really awesome apps, programs, or just ways to do things to manage it. So it's really not a headache at all. And I just don't think a lot of people understand that. And a lot of young artists, like you're saying, with thinking about their business plan and what they're going to do and how they're going to make money, I feel, at least, I don't know what you think, that those things can really help out before they get to a stage where they can get an accountant.
It's massive, and I don't underestimate this at all, because if I see that an artist has a separate bank account, has receipts that they're keeping hold of, has an accounting system in place, it shows to me that they're interested, they care about their business. Sure. I want to work with someone like that.
Absolutely.
So, it's something that, that proactive side of things, I can't work with everyone because I'm a small business.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit more about sort of the other services that I provide, but when it comes to business management, which is looking after sort of the whole financial spectrum for an artist, I can only work with an exclusive number of artists at any one time, so I have a roster of that. So anyone that I work with, I need a year of making sure I get to know them before it's that kind of relationship. Just like you would with your your manager, or perhaps not so for other people in your team. But for me, the financial side is such a critical and personal part of your business. You have to really trust both parties, you know, and to be able to achieve the things together that you want to achieve, you both need to be pulling in the same direction.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you made a really valid point there. It's like at the work with your manager, the way you trust your manager. You know, you trust someone with the kind of creative side and booking gigs and taking your career to the next level. Why wouldn't you trust, or why wouldn't you find someone to add to your team who, you know, helps your money work for you, looks after your money, or looks after the business strategy, the business side of things. So I wanted to ask you, obviously, you know, the strategies that you provide and the work that you do, it covers, you know, a wide spectrum. But are there any artists that you've, you know, I'm not asking you to name drop or anything, but are there any people that you've taken from an early stage, or you've worked with at an early stage, or they've gone on to do some really great things, or any businesses or any brands?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a fair few artists over the years. In particular, I remember starting out at the very early stages of an artist's career who went on to become the highest grossing earning electronic artist in the world for like the last 5 years.
Wow.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah, and seeing that story is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Being involved in pretty much every step along the way. You know, and just sort of as an example of the journey that they go on, you know, they start out in the UK. They need all these things. They start the same as every artist does. You know, they need to get their house in order. They need to get their financial things in place. They need to understand how to do that. And you know, moving forwards, getting then sort of the next record deal. You know, getting a #1 album. Going through those experiences with them is brilliant. That's why I do it.
Absolutely.
But also the challenges on the way.
Periods, were there lows? Or was it just?
No. There's highs and there's lows.
Right.
Like I see with every single artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got loads of stories about the highs and the lows of the artists that I work with. You know, everyone knows that if you get really high, you're going to fall really low when you do. But you know, seeing the journey that they go on, and actually part of my role is to be that rock. Funnily enough, there's about 3 or 4 artists that I've worked with for a long time. They've changed pretty much every part of their team apart from me.
Right.
So it's, you know, and I'm the sort of one on the sort of the end of the phone that they can talk to about other stuff that they can't really talk to about, you know, other people in their team. It's a relationship that I want, you know, because I need to have that in the way that I work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Am I right in saying it's a very personal relationship? Is it the kind of relationship that they can call you at 11 o'clock at night?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's the service that I provide. It's when it comes to the artists, you know, I have to be available, and of course they could be anywhere in the world. You know, they're touring all over the place, so I have to be, you know, available to them and have that, you know, obviously be that sounding board, because that's why I am there, you know. And it's not just the business part of things that I look after for them. Recently I helped an artist buying a house.
Right.
Helped them make a decision on buying a car. I remember a couple of years ago I helped an artist, or did sort of a cost-benefit analysis of buying a private jet. So it's those kind of things that it's outside of the scope of sort of the business strategy side of things, but they value, you know, that kind of impact is valued as well.
Sure. I know you were telling us about somebody that you took you were with in an earlier stage of their career, and then they went on to do incredible things. Are there any artists now that you have again, I'm not asking you to name drop, but are there people that you look out for, you know, in everyday life, whether it's listening to music or a live gig or a meeting, and you're like, okay, I want to find somebody to go on that journey again? Is there that excitement there?
Always. I mean, that's why, you know, I started the business that I did, because I want to work with people right from the start of their career, and I want to be on that journey with them, and I want to help them, because I've seen what has gone wrong for people, and I want to share that knowledge with them. I want to help guide people and to not make the same mistakes. I think, you know, that's incredibly valuable for people, and there's not really any books out there or any guidance that really does that. The problem that I have is that a lot of the bigger sort of West End accountancy practices guard their knowledge too much, whereas I'd rather people have the knowledge, and me be there as a sort of a guiding, a guidance for that.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called The UK Music Artist.
Oh, cool.
Which is a guide to starting in business.
Yeah.
I want to give people that knowledge. People could have that knowledge, but they also need to know when to get expert support as well and expert advice.
And where could we find that book?
So it's on Amazon. So
feel free to plug it, man.
The UK Music Artist, a practical guide to starting in business. It's just type it into Amazon, you find it there.
Awesome. I would love to check that out and kind of see the stuff that you're talking about. So Stephen, I have another question for you. When you work with artists, is one of your roles to bring in additional finances to their project by looking for investors, or is it just growing the money that they are that they currently have coming in through different streams? Do you, I suppose I'm trying to find out whether you actively look for investors for someone or tell them where to put their money.
Yeah, so when it comes to the investors side of things, I find that the best investors are those that are already invested in the artist.
Right.
And the investors that have the emotional connection already. That's going to be a much easier task than someone having to go out and shop your music to an investor that doesn't really care.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is that the artists will find their investors. The investors will come to the artist and say, I want to invest.
And then that's when they'll bring you in.
And then that's when I would normally come in, make sure that the setup is right, make sure that the right business structures are in place, make sure there's a business plan behind it, make sure the investors understand the risks.
Right.
And make sure the artists themselves know what they're getting themselves in for when someone invests in their music and their art, and advising around the complexities around that. But of course, I run the businesses for them on their behalf once that happens. Make sure that all the revenue streams, all the income is being collected on those.
Yeah.
Make sure that we're accounting for the costs. And of course, if you have an investor, just like you would if you had a record label, then you need to report to them.
Right.
You need to show the progress of the business. You need to show the investors when they're going to get a return on their investment. And of course, with any artist, there's usually managers and agents involved too, so they need reports on their earnings.
And this is all something that you'll generate?
This is all something that I will do for them. It's part of the accounting function that I provide.
Right.
And if you've got a business, you've got tax returns that need doing, so we take care of all of that. So it's basically taking a hold on those. But what I really like artists and the investors as well is to understand the project, understand the strategy behind it, and get everyone on the same page so everyone's pulling in the right direction.
I like what you said earlier about if you don't have them on the right page or same kind of understanding as the artist, you're effectively just trying to sell to them the way that somebody's trying to sell an album. I thought that was really cool. So one of my final questions, Stephen, by the sounds of it, you are working with artists who you can really help them kind of take care of the back end, the finances, business, all of that kind of stuff once they do have a decent amount of money coming in. Is there any advice that you could give for artists, young independent artists who really want to get involved in the music industry as creators? Is there any kind of advice, any tips, any gems that you might be able to give us?
Yeah. I found that the most successful artists understand that music is a commodity.
Right.
It's really inexpensive to make, and it's very abundant, and there's lots of it. You need to make sure, as an artist, your job is to turn that into something that's valuable.
Right.
And the way to do that is by creating an emotional connection to that with your fans. I mean, without that, it's just another track. You need to build a value proposition around that. You need to build a story. You need to be able to connect with people, and you need to find someone that's willing to pay for it.
Right.
So that'd be the first thing, and every successful artist starts with that in mind. They know that there's so much music out there. How am I going to make this different? How am I going to actually make this valuable? The other thing I would say that the most successful artists do, and sort of as a bit of advice, would be to make sure you define your purpose, why you do what you do, and then define your values as well, what you stand for. If you don't do either of those two things, you're just going to get swallowed up by the music industry, because it's a very difficult place to be.
Right.
Get your mindset in order first. Understand why you're doing it. Understand what drives you, and then build a team around that and your values, and only bring people on that are the same. And
so
then
it's
protect
effectively having a good hard think about what it is that you do and why you want to do it, and how you want to kind of get it completed.
Yeah, and don't make money your primary goal.
Right.
You need to spend time investing in getting it right, getting your mind right, getting your mindset right.
Right.
You know, a lot of people that I have met and seen make a lot of money very quickly. And actually, this is more so the managers than the artists. To a lot of extent, make a lot of money very quickly off the success of their artists, but they're not ready for it. They're not ready to earn that money yet, so they spend it.
Right. Okay.
So there's a kind of an evolution in your understanding of becoming an artist, becoming wealthy, building a career, and it's all part of the journey.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I guess, you know, don't judge yourself based on other people's success as well. Every artist is different. An independent artist's idea of success is going to be completely different from a commercial mainstream artist that's got a super powerhouse. Doesn't necessarily mean they're earning any more. You know,
Right.
Independent artists own all their rights. They have, you know, they have a bigger share of the profits. You know, you don't need to be as big as the next person. You know, if you want to be a credible artist, you know, the journey is different for everyone, and you need to make sure that you have, you know.
It must be so. I mean, I imagine it's quite hard to not compare yourself to a commercial artist or anybody else. You know, peers, especially with social media, and it's a lot more in your face. To let's say you've had a bad day, you're going through one of the lows, which I suspect happens far more often than people actually know. You know, and you go on social media and you see somebody celebrating this or that or having an amazing show. It must be quite. I imagine it can be quite demoralising sometimes to see that kind of stuff.
It can be, and
if you have the wrong mentality.
You have the wrong mentality, and no, it happens for everyone anyway. And you need to experience that so you can understand. If you know what the lows are like, then you know what success is like. So you've got to have a kind of a balance in there. But I guess when it comes to artists in particular, you know, there is everyone's journey is going to be different. You know, don't make money your main driver, but obviously you need to create a structure that will sustain yourself. You know, but that needs to be linked to your values. You know, if a lot of these successful commercial artists have had to do things that they perhaps don't want to do, and look what happens to them. You know, they burn out. They don't know really. Some of them, you know, lose track of what they're doing and who they are.
Right.
And it's you know, if you can stick to your core purpose, then from the artists that I work with, you know, they have a lot longer career. You know, and that's really what it's about. You know, creating a long, successful, sustainable career.
And that would be by getting everything in the early stages sorted. To a good platform to build your career on top of, right?
Absolutely. Get your mindset ready in the first instance. Think of yourself as a business. That's what I tell my artists. Think of business of me, you know, and build your art around that.
Right.
Let's try and separate your art from your personal, and you know, from that you start gaining that knowledge and gaining that understanding. The artists that come through sort of the early stages, and they become, you know, get a bit of success, they get a bit of money, and then they start their own businesses. You know, they start. In fact, every single artist, when they get to a certain point, has set up a record label that I've worked with. You know, that's because they're entrepreneurial. They're starting to get confident with business. They understand business, and that's great. It means that, you know, they're being educated and they understand more about it, and they're excited by it. They're not scared of it.
Fantastic. Advice, the business of me. I think that's a really nice way to kind of sum it up, because I really do think a lot of young people or young creative artists don't think of these kind of things. So Stephen, where can artists find more of what you do and what you kind of, firstly your work, or I know we spoke about your book. Feel free to plug that again, where someone can find that to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so the UK Music Artist: A Practical Guide to Starting in Business is on Amazon. That's for emerging artists, wanting some tips on how to start up and some sort of general advice on getting to that next stage. And you can email me at stephen@pellartists.com. That's Stephen with a PH at Pell Artists, which is PELL, and then artists.com. And Twitter at Pell Artists as well.
And one final question that we ask everybody who comes on the podcast. In your opinion, what makes a successful artist?
I think I alluded to before. I think it's the definiteness of purpose.
Right.
And how else would I explain success? I would say it's continual improvement on a journey towards your worthy ideal.
That's summed up really nicely. Cool. Stephen, thank you so much for coming down. It's been really, really insightful. I look really forward to checking out your book, and hopefully some people will get in touch, and I really think you've added fantastic value today. So thank you.
Great. It's been a pleasure.